Welcome to Light Over Heat with Professor David Yamani. This week I'm talking about the insurrection. When I saw the events unfolding at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021, two thoughts ran through my mind. The first was, holy crap, WTF is going on? And the second was, they're going to blame gun owners and gun culture for this. And sure enough, on January 11th in the Atlantic, a philosopher wrote that the gun rights movement, especially the NRA, was responsible for promoting insurrectionist fever dreams. Now, in this book chapter, which I'll link to in the show notes, I question where the missing insurrectionist gun owners were, because there are 75 million gun owners in America who own over 400 million guns, and very few people sought to storm the Capitol in order to stop the steal on that day. But it does raise the empirical question of what proportion of gun owners support that action or support insurrection more generally, or think that it's necessary, and how do those proportions of gun owners compare to the American population more generally? And I have some information that I'm able to share that speaks to these issues. In the paper I've been speaking about that will be published in the Annals this fall, I draw on an unpublished analysis by Ryan Jerome LeCount of a data set called Nationscape. It's meant to be nationally representative data, and asking a survey question after January 6, 2021, they asked respondents whether they approved of the actions of the people who stormed the U.S. Capitol. And the levels of support in response to this question varied according to gun ownership. So, for example, 16.4% of those who personally own guns said they did approve of the actions of the people who stormed the U.S. Capitol. 9.4% of people who lived in gun-owning households but didn't personally own guns supported those actions. And 7.3% of those who don't own guns or live in gun-owning households said they approved of the actions of the people who stormed the U.S. Capitol. So there's about a 10 percentage point difference between those who personally own guns and those who don't own guns or live in gun-owning households. So that's fairly significant. On the other hand, even among those who personally own guns, 83% did not approve of the actions of those who stormed the Capitol. So gun owners more supportive, but most gun owners did not approve of that action. Another recent attempt to get at some of these issues of political polarization and views toward political violence and insurrection was in a survey sponsored by the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. And they made a statement that they asked their respondents, who were registered voters, not all Americans, important to note. The statement that they gave was, it may be necessary at some point soon for citizens to take up arms against the government. So do people agree that it may be necessary at some point soon for citizens to take up arms against the government? And 1 in 3 Republicans agreed with this, as well as 1 in 3 independents, and even 1 in 5 Democrats. So again, Republicans and independents more likely to affirm this statement, but even 1 in 5 Democrats affirmed that it may be necessary at some point soon for citizens to take up arms against the government. Now, are gun owners more likely to affirm this statement? It may make sense that they are, because if you're going to take up arms, it helps if you're armed from the start, but it's not a requirement that you own guns to affirm this statement. And they find that more than 1/3 of voters with guns in their household also agree. So 37% of people who have guns in their household agree with that statement, including 12% of those who strongly agree, as compared to only 25% of people who don't have guns in their household. So the difference in agreement overall with that statement is 37% for gun owners and 25% for non-gun owners. So a gap of about 12%. But again, gun owners more likely to say it may be necessary to take up arms, but a substantial minority of people who don't own guns, including people who are Democrats. Another not yet published study of this issue was conducted by two bright young political scientists, Alexandra Middlewood and Abigail Vegter. And they look at the American National Election Study data from 2020 to address the question of political violence. Middlewood and Vector look at this question. How much do you feel it is justified for people to use violence to pursue their political goals in this country? And respondents had a 5-point scale from not at all to a great deal. And in a multivariate statistical analysis controlling for other variables that we think could affect people's views on this question, Middlewood and Vector find that gun owners are less likely than non-gun owners to say that political violence is justified. So we have various different things happening here with respect to the question of insurrection, support for the January 6th storming of the Capitol, support for the idea of armed resistance to the government in general, support for political violence, and they all say somewhat different things, so, which is not surprising because the world is an extremely complex place. And if anybody wants to give you a simplistic narrative of what's happening and why, you need to resist that in the interest of light over the heat that those kinds of simplistic explanations produce. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the question of insurrection, whether it's specific to January 6th or the idea of the Second Amendment as a defense against tyranny more generally, or anything in between. Leave me some comments. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts.